Will Akito the Exiled ever get a Season 2? The 5-part OVA series was straight fire. However, despite there being a tease of more, a continuation never came. Was it because the fanbase hated the series? Or was it because they really had no more story to tell? I'll break down all of this, and by the end of this video, I'll reveal my shocking theory on whether Akito is getting a continuation or not. But first, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're a Code Geass fan like me, then the Geass Network is the place for you. Now back to Akito of the Exiled. The OVA, in my opinion, was a fresh and cool expansion of the Code Geass universe, however. Despite Sunrise's insistence on exploiting this franchise, for some reason the studio never pulled the trigger. Funny enough though, Lelouch kinda got the continuation of his story in the Lelouch of the Resurrection film in 2019, and this is after Lulu died at the end of his series, for God's sake. But Akito, who by the way survived his series, doesn't get a second season. Let's transition to the first topic I want to cover, a mini review of the OVA series, emphasis on mini. Don't worry, this is necessary for the points I'm going to cover in this video. Of course, this includes the final topic. The shocking theory regarding whether we're going to get an Akito continuation or not. Look, there's no getting around it. Lelouch of the Rebellion is the best anime of all time. And this isn't just my bias as a Code Geass fanboy. Just look at any respectable best anime list through the 2000s. And the original Code Geass series will be somewhere there. Anyway, back in 2012, in the wake of Lelouch of the Rebellion, Akito the Exiled arrived onto the scene. And to be fair, the OVA series was largely met with middling reception. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I will address fan reception more in depth later in the video. The fact is, many people didn't quite take to Akito immediately because it didn't really feel like Code Geass. However, that's the precise reason why I loved it. To me, it felt like a breath of fresh air. Unlike Rosé of the Recapture, it didn't play it safe by using the same setting of Japan and trying to retread the same story beats as the original. That series was called Recapture for a reason. It tried to recapture the magic of Lelouch of the Rebellion, and unfortunately, it fell short of hitting the mark. Akito wasn't set in Japan, but instead took us to another corner of this universe yet to be explored, the EU. This was a far cry from the Tokyo settlements and the Shinjuku ghettos of Area 11. We, as the audience, were introduced to the Republic of Europa, Eurobritannia, the Order of Michael, and the Ghosts of Hannibal crew. Speaking of the Ghosts of Hannibal, we got a whole new cast of characters to follow. Each of them were cool, despite not being as fully fleshed out as the protagonist, Akito Hyuga. But that is to be expected. The OVA only had 5 episodes to begin with, instead of the robust 50 episodes Lelouch of the Rebellion had. The series also introduced us to a new type of nightmare frame, Alexanders. I loved how they could shift and crawl around like spiders. And let's not forget the crazy jazz soundtrack during the awesome mecha fight scenes. This was one department the OVA series surpasses the original Code Geass. The battle scenes were fast-paced, dynamic, and engaging. Another aspect this series is better at than Lelouch of the Rebellion has to be the villain. Shin Hyuga was far more complex and layered than either Charles or Schneisel. Firstly, he'd not only had Lelouch's exact Geass power, but he also had his swagger as well. He is what I'd imagine a villainous Lelouch would be like, and his motivation were an absolute chef's kiss in my opinion. He was a man who hated the world, and believed that the only way to save people from the cruelty of this reality was to kill them. Speaking of Shin, we can't forget about his little brother, Akito Hyuga, the main character. Having to follow up Lelouch as the franchise's next protagonist was no easy feat. While Akito is no Lelouch v Britannia, he definitely brought his own unique swagger to the franchise. I'd say Lelouch is the Light Yagami of the Code Geass universe, but Akito is the Eren Yeager of this universe. So I loved it every time he would say, "Die!" What can I say? I like my anime protagonists a little crazy. Let's move on to the next topic. This one will play into my shocking theory on whether we'll see Akito and the rest of the Ghosts of Hannibal gang again. Akito is no Lelouch of the Rebellion. I've already made reference to this earlier in the video. But it's worth bringing up again if we're going to discuss the fan reception to the OVA series. However, I love the series. When it comes to the individual quality of each Code Geass project, I personally don't need it to be as good as the original anime. That's a high bar, and frankly, I feel like it's a bit unrealistic. In fact, I would argue that there aren't many anime series in general that are on the level of Lelouch of the Rebellion. I feel that when you require every new Code Geass project to be as good as the original, disappointment is inevitable. But I will say that recently I've noticed some fans warm up to the OVA anime a bit, and I can't help but feel like it has something to do with the Rosé of the Recapture series. Or more precisely, the reception Rosé got from the fanbase. Okay, I'm not going to beat above the bush here. Rosé was easily the worst received Code Geass project ever. And to be frank, Akito probably looks a lot better now in the aftermath of Rosé of the Recapture. This is obvious when you look at some of the online discourse about Code Geass. And this does nothing but help Akito's case for a future continuation. Let's move on to the last topic before we get to the theory I've been teasing. Speaking of continuations, earlier I mentioned how Lelouch got his in the 2019 film, Lelouch of the Resurrection. So this happened. Lulu had died in both universe continuities, so why can't Akito Hyuga get his? At the end of the OVA series, they did tease more by having Eurobatania acknowledge the threat the ghosts of Hannibal pose. And as I've said before, most of the supporting cast from the OVA are all still alive. Prior to Rosé of the Recapture, I wouldn't have expected to see more of Akito the Exiled. However, after the cameo appearances of the ghosts of Hannibal in the aforementioned anime spin-off series, I'm inclined to think otherwise. That cameo, in my opinion, proved that the studio acknowledges that the OVA series does have a fan base. And there are people out there that want to see Akito and the gang again. Now then, let's move on to the actual final topic. My theory regarding Akito's future. I've been teasing my theory from the beginning of this video, and now I'm going to deliver on my promise. But firstly, let's ask the question. What are the realistic chances we will ever get an Akito the Exiled Season 2? Or perhaps a movie exploring more stories with these characters? Well, after the Rosé of the Recapture series, I'd say the chances are certainly better than they might have been a few years ago. Of course, that's just my opinion. However, I don't believe the Akito continuation will come in the form of an OVA, or a full-length Season 2 either. Now this is where my theory comes in. Sunrise seems to be more invested in the theatrical experience these days. Let's take a look at the Lelouch of the Resurrection film, for example. That story could have easily been a 12-episode series that fleshed its plot a lot more. But the studio opted to go the movie route instead. Not to mention, the 5 Akito episodes were released in theaters as well as Rosé of the Recapture. The spin-off was released as a 3-part movie series for Japanese audiences. Unlike the 12-episode viewing experience Disney Plus viewers were treated to in the US. I bring all this up because I believe that we might get the Akito continuation in the form of a 2-hour theatrical film. Not only that, but I think this film would be a Code Geass universe crossover movie, Marvel style. This is the shocking part of my theory, by the way. You might wonder, why do I believe Sunrise would go in this direction? The first reason is because of Code Geass producer, Kojiro Taniguchi, and the comments he made in 2019, in the run-up to the Resurrection film's release. Taniguchi said that the movie was phase 1 of a 10-year strategy of new Code Geass content. The key phrase here is phase 1. If you're at all familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you might be aware that the term phase is used to segment and organize the different film slates Marvel produces. Some might argue that it was just a coincidence. The term phase is not unique to Marvel, and that is true. However, let me bring you to my next point. In December 2025, Sunrise released this image to promote their Code Geass event, Road to the 20th Anniversary. This showed all the franchise's protagonists together. To me, they seemed like a sort of Geass Avengers, if you will. And the studio also announced that to celebrate the 20th anniversary, all 12 theatrical films would play as a marathon in theaters in Japan. Marvel Studios was known to do this all the time before the release of one of their big Avengers crossover movies. If you put all the facts together, you can see what I'm trying to explain here. Akito will likely get the continuation of his story through a Geass Avengers crossover event, instead of a show or a standalone movie. Similar to Mark Ruffalo in the MCU. Yes, I know my theory is crazy, but don't be surprised if I turn out to be true. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time, bye.
I, Lelouch v. Britannia, command you. Now all of you.
Subscribe now.